Hi, everybody. You probably wonder when they're letting me out of this jail, right? Um, I wanted to talk about something that I said in the original videos when I first started out a few years ago that I was going to talk about often, and I really haven't. And that is morals and ethics, morality, and it's because morality is tangled up with so many other issues when you start dealing in it. And I've talked a lot about science and futurism and things like that, and also I've talked about politics and history and economics, and all of these things I think are all intertwined in ways that reflect upon one another. And to talk about morality, you have to look at a specific issue and then talk about why that issue is moral or immoral. But I've been thinking about morality and watching videos. I took philosophy in college, and I was a B student in philosophy. So you're getting a B student's version of moral philosophy here. But I also took a lot of economics in college, and I got A's in economics. And I do have not that I'm the world's greatest economist, but I have this theory about economics that I've been purporting on these videos for a long time. And I don't know if other people have the same idea as me or not, but a lot of them are way off. They don't at all have the same ideas. And I feel that the ideas about economics that people have in the world today, for some reason, reflect on both the politics and the morality of our day. But let me talk about, real quick, I'm going to talk about morality as I'm trying to figure this out. I think that morality goes, I made up a chart. It's a three horizontal classifications and two vertical classifications, and I'm sure it's incomplete. But what I'm talking about when I'm talking about morality is there's people who are absolutists in their beliefs about morality, and then there's people who are kind of in the middle, and then there's the complete relativists about morality, right? But the top and bottom of the chart would be the be nice people on the top and the mean people on the bottom. So there's these various forms of morality that you can come down on this chart, and I made it the chart, but I maybe I'll put it in here somewhere. The idea is that if you're an absolutist, you can both be a nice absolutist and a mean absolutist. Um, for example, the people who are religious are generally absolutists. They believe that there's some sort of moral dictate that comes down in their holy books and so forth that tell them, without them having to do much thinking about it, what is good and what is bad. And those could be both nice and mean. So the nice absolutist philosophy would be like Jesus in his Sermon of the Mount, his Beatitudes, as they call it, where he says nice things like, if your enemy strikes you, you should turn the other cheek, or whatever you do for the very least of my brethren, so you do unto me. So if you see someone hungry, you should give them something to eat. And if you see somebody thirsty, you should give them something to drink. And this is a dictate that Christians are supposed to follow, and mostly they don't, but that's why it's so hard to be a Christian, I suppose. Then you can go to the other side of the relativist side, and there's people like Nietzsche and Thomas Hobbes, and really I can admire a bunch of these people. That's kind of the problem when you can you can't choose your morality a la carte. You have to take it in whatever column it's in. For example, in Thomas Hobbes's belief is in what we call contractualism, and which is a social contract within a society that says that we're going to vote on what is moral and what isn't moral, and the government will make laws accordingly. And if you live within that society, then you have to follow those dictates according to what is the popular uh, viewpoint of all the people. And I kind of agree with that. You have a moral society. Hopefully, people are moral, and they'll make moral choices, and they'll keep the bad people in line. Then there's there's the not so nice relativists like Nietzsche, for example, who says that we make up morality in our head. We make up these archetypes, and if you can live with yourself, you can make up any type. Well, that's a good sociopath morality, right? And then there's the absolutists that aren't so nice too, like the I did. This is kind of what triggered this issues about morality with me. But I did a video about Ayn Rand was wrong, and I got one of her zealot followers, I don't know, a nice person, put a nice comment into my video, saying that if you force somebody again, to help another person, then that would be immoral because it restricts their freedom, which means that if you pay taxes and you don't want to pay taxes, then it's immoral that you should do so, and they should give some of your taxes to the people for food stamps or for Social Security or something. In other words, they think that's immoral because it restricts my freedom not to give to other people if I so choose not to give. It takes away the ability of the gifted people to achieve their highest level of achievement because they're being held down by having to help other people. Well, that's not a very nice philosophy, but it is. But they believe it's immoral. They believe that freedom of the individual is the absolute most important moral quality that we should have in our society. And really, if you want to carry that along with Thomas Hobbes, he would say that if they get enough votes together, that should be the philosophy of the time, then that would really be the moral philosophy of the nation. And I feel that in our day and age, there has been a expensive and concerted effort by people who are on that moral philosophy, and I can mention some names like Rush Limbaugh and Paul, what's his name, the Speaker of the House. They believe in the Ayn Rand philosophy that the government has no place in helping the less fortunate, except maybe the most extremely less fortunate. Well, that's a debatable thing, but what they've done is they've made a dichotomy, a disagreement between two economic philosophies. And this is where I'm getting at. I see this still in a lot of these videos about economics that I watch on YouTube and so forth, and read books about this. And they've made a disagreement in between the socialists and the capitalists, or the communists and the capitalists. And some fellow I was watching just recently was saying how it all kind of began in about 1800. The capitalism was invented in 1800, and then since then the world has prospered at a much greater rate, which is baloney, by the way, absolute and unequivocal baloney. Capitalism has existed for thousands of years. I mean, read the Bible, which is very old, and there is a parable that Jesus told about the steward that went away, and he had his 3 stewards appointed and gave them money and told them, I'm going to go away, I'm going to come back, so you take care of this money. And one of the guys spent the money frivolously. Another guy took the money very carefully and ran away and buried it somewhere hidden in the ground so nobody could find it. And then the third guy, he went out and he bought seeds and land, and and farm equipment and had a bunch of people work for him, and he grew a bunch of crops and made all kinds of money and increased the money, like I think he said tenfold or something like that. And when the guy came back, he said, "Okay, let's see what you did." And the first guy said, "Oh, sorry, I blew all the money." And the second guy came back and dug it up and brought it back and said, "Look, I got the money. I saved it all, every penny." And then the third guy came back and said, "Look, I increased it tenfold." And the guy who increased it tenfold, he got the job as the steward of the whole lands and everything, because he did such a good. But he was a capitalist, right? I mean, what he did is he spent the money. He took, there's a chance in capitalism. The crops could have failed. There could have been a deflationary period. The guy who buried it in the ground may have ended up better off. If the crops had all failed and there was a deflationary period, then the guy who buried it in the ground would still have the original amount of money, and he would have been the one who won. So the guy who was the capitalist took a chance, and he ended up making more money. See, so my point being, that's a very long point, but capitalism has existed since at least the time of Jesus, right? I mean, there's other examples like that in the Bible, but what they've done is we're looking at, in a lot of the economic philosophy of today, it has insinuated itself into politics completely, and it's 19th century philosophy to say, oh well, there's the capitalists over here and the communists over here and the socialists over here, and they're in opposition to each other. And I've explained this before on some of my videos. They're not two sides of the same coin. They're not in opposition to each other. They're two different things that relate to each other, but socialism needs a capitalist system. Capitalism doesn't need a socialist system, but capitalism doesn't need anything to exist. It occurs naturally within social interactions in a marketplace. And when they look at Adam Smith and Karl Marx, I've had this argument for a long time with people. They're not opposites of each other. There might be parts of it that are opposites of each other, but they're not really absolute opposites. They existed within 50 years of each other, I do believe. But Adam Smith was a scientific viewpoint about the economic system. What he essentially did is defined, with an age of reason and rationalism, the scientific analysis of the economic system, which they call capitalism. Okay, and then he did have a little bit of advocacy for what is called laissez-faire philosophy, which says that the government should keep its hands off of business at all costs, and that's kind of an advocacy that he had. But Karl Marx was more of a radical who was all about advocacy. He wasn't defining anything. He was setting up a proposition for change. And that's not a scientific, it might be technological, but it's not a scientific. So my point being, as I make this quickly, is capitalism always comes into existence in the marketplace, according to what Adam Smith says: supply and demand. The what do they call it? The invisible hand. The price is set by supply and demand, and when there's a larger supply of something, it's less expensive, and when there's a larger demand, it's more expensive, and smaller demand, it's less expensive. And socialism has always come to exist for many, many, many years, not as long as capitalism. Any form of government whatsoever that benefits the people underneath it is socialism. They always have taxes, and it's a form of technology to control what is the natural system called capitalism. Capitalism is like the river, like the Columbia River, and socialism is more like the dam on the Columbia River that produces electricity. It's a form of human technology. So That's what I have to say about that. And it all somehow they made this into a moral and political issue.